My name is Mira, I'm 29, and right now I'm standing in the middle of a life I'm barely holding together. My mother is losing pieces of herself every day, the bills are stacked higher than my hope, and I'm doing everything I can not to break. The night I told her, "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house," she looked at me like I had ripped the last good memory out of her hands. But she didn't know what I had really done, or what I was about to risk to save her. I never imagined life could change this fast, or that I would be the one making decisions that felt too heavy for my own hands. After my mother stared at me in silence after the words, "I sold your beach house," echoed through the small apartment like a betrayal neither of us could swallow, I walked into my room, closed the door and let myself breathe for the first time all day. My hands were trembling. My chest felt tight, like I had swallowed every fear I'd been avoiding for the past 2 years. I kept hearing her voice in my head, soft and confused, asking, "Why would you do that, Mira?" And the worst part was that I couldn't answer her, not yet. The truth was messy, complicated, emotional, and too painful to say out loud. Because the beach house wasn't just property. It wasn't just a building. It was the last safe place she remembered with clarity, the place where she used to braid my hair under the sun, where she'd wake me at dawn just so we could watch the waves crash with the kind of peace she never had anywhere else. Selling it, or pretending to, felt like cutting the last tether she had to her old self. But I didn't have a choice. I didn't think we'd survive this year without doing something drastic. The medical bills were swallowing us whole. Started almost 2 years ago. The first time she forgot where she placed her keys, I didn't think much of it. Everyone forgets sometimes. The second time she misplaced her phone and accused me of hiding it as a joke. Something I've never done. But even then I brushed it off. It wasn't until she forgot my birthday that something inside me cracked. My mother had never forgotten anything that mattered. She used to remember every detail, the exact year each plant in her garden bloomed, the smell of the ocean on days when storms rolled in, the way I used to cry whenever she washed my favorite blanket. She always remembered. Until she didn't. When the doctor said the words early-stage cognitive decline, my mother laughed like it was a misunderstanding. But I didn't. I sat there, frozen, while the doctor explained symptoms, medication, progression. I felt like someone had taken a shovel and dug a hole inside my chest, deep and dark. I didn't know what scared me more, losing her slowly or knowing I had to be the one responsible for everything she would eventually forget. As the months passed, things started slipping faster than I was ready for. Some mornings she woke up and didn't know what day it was. Other days she'd wander through the apartment looking for home, even though she was standing in it. And sometimes, on the worst days, she'd stare at me like she knew she was supposed to love me, but couldn't remember why. Those days broke me in ways I still can't explain. The bills came next. The medication, the specialists, the scans, the therapies the insurance refused to cover. My savings disappeared. Then the emergency fund. Then the credit cards. Every time I thought it couldn't get worse, it did. I was working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, barely living. But the one thing I refused to touch, the one thing I swore I'd never sacrifice, was the beach house. Until I realized I might lose her completely if I didn't. I remember the night I made the decision. I was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by medical forms and overdue notices, shaking with exhaustion. My mother was asleep in the next room, her door cracked open the way mine used to be when I was a child scared of the dark. I stared at the piles and piles of bills and then at the photograph on the fridge. The two of us standing in front of the beach house, the sky pink behind us, her hair blowing wildly in the wind. She looked so alive in that picture. So full of joy. I touched her smiling face with my fingertips and whispered, "Mom, I'm so sorry." I think that was the moment I knew I would have to cross a line I never wanted to. But the truth was that I didn't sell the house the way she thought. I wasn't giving it away. I wasn't letting it go. I was moving it out of our hands temporarily so that I could protect her long term. I'd made a deal, one she didn't know about, that would secure everything we needed. Medical care. A safety net. Stability. And, eventually, the house back in our name. But all she knew was the painful part, that I had taken away the only place she clung to. The day after I told her, the apartment felt colder than ever. She didn't speak to me. She didn't look at me. When she passed me in the hallway on her way to the bathroom, she kept her eyes on the floor. And I let her hate me because if hating me made her pain easier, then I could carry that weight. I packed the car quietly that morning. The air outside felt heavy, like even the sky knew something was breaking between us. I folded her clothes gently, placing her favorite cardigan on top. The one she always wore at the beach. The blue one, soft and frayed at the sleeves. She didn't ask where we were going and I didn't offer an explanation. I only said, "It's going to be okay." She didn't answer. I helped her into the passenger seat, buckled her in the same way she used to buckle me when I was small. She still wouldn't look at me. And I felt myself disappearing into this hollow space where guilt and determination fought for control. As we pulled out of the parking lot, she whispered, barely audible, "You shouldn't have done it, Mira." I swallowed the ache in my throat. I know. The drive was long, quiet, and tense. Every road sign felt like a countdown to a confrontation I wasn't ready for. I could see her fidgeting, staring out the window with this distant sadness that made me want to turn the car around and undo everything. But I couldn't. Not anymore. And when we finally reached the edge of the town where the beach house stood waiting, she exhaled, long and shaky, like she was bracing herself for heartbreak. That was when I realized she didn't just think I'd sold a house. She thought I'd given up on her memories, her life, her identity, and maybe in her eyes on her. I gripped the steering wheel harder, wishing she knew the truth, wishing she knew I was fighting for her in ways she couldn't see. Because what she didn't know was, I wasn't taking her away from the beach house. I was taking her back. And I prayed she'd forgive me when she finally understood why. I don't know what I expected the moment we turned onto the old coastal road. Maybe some flicker in her eyes, a spark of recognition, something to let me believe that bringing her back here wouldn't hurt as much as taking her away from it. But she didn't react at first. She kept staring ahead, her hands folded in her lap, her expression distant. It wasn't until the salty air drifted through the cracked window that I saw her shoulders shift slightly, like her body remembered something her mind was still searching for. The ocean came into view slowly, a blurred streak of blue behind the dunes. The sound of waves crashing against the shore grew louder as we drove, and for a moment I almost forgot about the weight sitting between us, the betrayal she believed I had committed. I parked the car at the top of the hill that overlooked the beach house. The familiar white roof peeked out between the palm trees, unchanged, untouched, exactly as it always had been. The sight hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't seen it in months, not since the paperwork started and my life became a rotating cycle of phone calls, signatures, and sleepless nights. Seeing it again felt like stepping into a version of myself I had lost long ago. My mother didn't look at it. Not yet. She kept her gaze lowered as if she didn't want to face the truth of what I told her, that the house no longer belonged to us. My chest tightened because I knew how much this moment mattered, how much she was bracing herself for disappointment. I wanted to tell her everything right then, that the house was safe, that the deal was temporary, that none of this was what she thought. But my voice stayed trapped in my throat. The timing wasn't right. Not while she was still hurting. Not while her trust in me was hanging by a thread. "Mom," I said softly, "we're here." She didn't answer. Instead, she opened the car door slowly, her movements stiff, and stepped out into the cool breeze. Her hair fluttered around her face as she inhaled deeply, the kind of breath someone takes when they're preparing themselves for loss. It physically hurt to watch her do it. She walked a few steps forward, stopping just before the edge of the hill, and finally lifted her gaze toward the place she had once called her sanctuary. At first she didn't react at all. Then her lips parted slightly as if something inside her cracked open. I stood behind her, silent, afraid to break whatever fragile moment was unfolding. She looked smaller somehow, standing there wrapped in confusion and resentment. I wondered what memories were drifting back to her. The ones I prayed she still held, the ones I feared were gone forever. After nearly a full minute, she whispered, "It looks the same." Her voice trembled, barely audible above the wind. "Of course it does," I said. "It's only been a year." She closed her eyes, a faint frown carving itself across her forehead. "It feels like longer." I swallowed hard. "I know." I walked beside her, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal terrified of being touched. Even then, I kept a respectful distance, giving her space to feel whatever she needed to feel. I wished I could reach out and hold her hand, but I didn't know if she would let me, or if she would pull away. We made our way down the sandy path toward the house. Each step felt heavier than the last. The closer we got, the more I felt my mother retreat into herself, like she was trying to protect the parts of her heart that still remembered joy. I wanted to tell her she had nothing to fear, that what waited inside wasn't loss but something else entirely. But the words stayed inside me, locked away beneath fear and guilt. When we reached the front porch, she paused. Her hand hovered above the railing as if touching it would break her. I stood beside her, watching her eyes trace every detail. The chipped paint, the sun-bleached wood, the wind chime she hung 10 years ago that still clinked softly in the breeze. She noticed the smallest things, the things I didn't think she'd remember. It made my heart swell and ache at the same time. She whispered, "It still smells like the ocean." "It always will," I said quietly. For a moment we stood there in silence, listening to the waves and the humming of the chimes. Then she turned her head slightly and looked at me for the first time since yesterday. Her eyes weren't angry. They were tired. Searching. "Why did you do it, Mira?" she asked. "Why did you sell it? This place was all I had left." Her voice cracked at the end and the sound nearly brought me to my knees. I took a breath, steadying myself. "Mom, But before I could say anything else, the front door opened. She flinched. I didn't, because I knew who it was. He stepped out onto the porch slowly, cautiously, his expression unreadable. He looked older, worn down, and undeniably uncomfortable standing there. My mother's face drained of color as she stared at him, confusion spiraling into shock. "Mira," she whispered. "What is he doing here?" I felt my pulse pound in my ears. This was the moment I had dreaded and prayed for at the same time. The moment everything would start unraveling, the moment truth would begin to surface. But nothing could prepare me for the way her voice trembled when she spoke. Why is your uncle here?" The word uncle felt foreign in her mouth. A title that once meant something, then meant nothing, then became something darker as the years passed. Once upon a time he had been family. Then he became the ghost we stopped talking about. He cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Elena," he said gently, "you look..." She took a step back, shaking her head. No. You shouldn't be here. She turned to me, panic rising. "Mira, why is he here? Why would you bring me to him?" I reached out, but she moved away from my hand. "I didn't bring you to him," I said. "I brought you home." Her eyes filled with tears. "Home? You said you sold it." "I did," I whispered. "To him." Her expression shattered completely. "Why?" My uncle stepped down the porch steps. He kept a respectful distance, as if he knew he didn't have the right to get closer. "Because she didn't have another choice, Elena. And because I owed you. I always did." She stared at him with disbelief. Pure, overwhelming disbelief. And I saw memories flicker behind her eyes like broken film. Bigger. Hurt. Loss. Abandonment. My mother had survived too many storms alone, and the man who walked away from her when she needed him most was now standing on the porch of her most precious place. Her voice came out barely human. "Get out." He nodded slowly. "I will. But first I need to say..." "I said get out," she screamed, and her voice cracked so violently it echoed through the trees. He froze. I moved toward her quickly, gently, like approaching someone whose heart was splitting open. "Mom, listen to me," I said softly. "Please. Just listen." She shook her head, tears streaming now. "Why would you do this to me? Why would you give my house to him? Of all people, why him?" I felt my own eyes burn. "Because I couldn't lose you." She stared at me like she didn't understand, or maybe like she didn't want to understand. The pain was too heavy, too tangled in old wounds that never fully healed. I took her hands in mine. She didn't pull away this time. "Mom," I whispered, "I didn't give him the house. I traded it." She blinked. "Traded? For your treatment. For everything the insurance wouldn't cover. For stability. For a guarantee that you would be cared for no matter what happens." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "And it's temporary," I continued. "The contract is written so the house comes back to us once everything is paid off. I didn't take anything from you. I protected you." Tears filled her eyes until they overflowed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you'd say no," I whispered. "Even if it meant hurting yourself. Even if it meant losing everything. You would have said no just to keep this house. And I couldn't let you do that." She closed her eyes and pressed her forehead against mine, her breath shaky. "You should have trusted me." "I did," I said. "But I also had to save you." Behind us, my uncle stood silently, his expression filled with regret so deep it made him look older than he was. He knew he didn't deserve forgiveness. He knew my mother might never accept his presence here. But he also knew he owed her a debt, one he had avoided for far too long. My mother finally pulled away, wiping her face with trembling hands. Her voice was thin, fragile. "I want to go inside." I nodded. She walked slowly toward the house, pausing just before the door. Her hand hovered over the old brass handle, the same one she installed the summer I turned 12. The same one she polished every morning because she said it made the house look alive. She hesitated, then pushed the door open. The familiar scent enveloped us. Ocean breeze, old wood, lavender from the sachets she used to leave in the drawers. Felt like stepping into a memory. She walked in without waiting for me, her eyes darting from room to room as if checking whether the past was still intact. I watched her shoulders relax slightly with every step she took. My uncle remained outside. I turned to him. "You should give her time," I said quietly. He nodded. "I know. You're not here to replace anything. You're here to repay what you owe." "I know that too." I exhaled slowly. "Just don't make things harder." "I won't." When I walked inside, I found my mother standing in the living room, touching the old bookshelf where she used to keep her favorite novels. Her fingers traced the grooves in the wood as if searching for reassurance. "It's all here," she whispered. "Of course it is," I said. "Nothing's changed. Except everything had." She turned toward me, her expression softer now but still weighed down by confusion. "I don't know how to feel." "You don't have to feel anything right now," I said gently. "Just breathe. Let yourself be here." Her eyes wandered toward the windows, where sunlight spilled into the room in warm strips. She walked over and looked out at the ocean, her hand pressed lightly against the glass. I could tell memories were stirring, slow, delicate, painful ones. "I used to sit here every morning," she murmured, "with my tea, and you'd run outside without brushing your hair." I laughed softly. "I hated brushing my hair." "You still do." We stood together in the quiet for a long moment, both of us remembering different versions of the same past. She turned toward me again. "Mira, I'm not angry anymore. But I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of forgetting this place again." I stepped closer and took her hand. "Then I'll remember it for you." She closed her eyes, letting my words settle into her heart. I knew this wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And for now, that was enough. That first night back in the beach house felt unreal, like I was drifting between past and present, trying to hold both at once without losing my grip. My mother fell asleep early, curled on the old couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked peaceful for the first time in months, as if something inside her had settled just by being here. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her chest rise and fall, memorizing the softness of her expression. I hadn't seen her this calm in so long that it felt like witnessing a miracle. When I stepped outside, the air was cool against my skin. The sky was painted with stars, the kind so bright you could almost hear them humming. My uncle was sitting on the porch steps, staring at the ocean like he was trying to untangle every mistake he'd ever made. I hesitated before joining him. Even though I had invited him into this deal, being near him still stirred a complicated mix of feelings. Resentment, gratitude, suspicion, and a small piece of me that still remembered him as the man who bought me ice cream every Sunday when I was 7. He didn't look at me when I sat down. "She asleep?" he asked quietly. "Yes." "That's good." His voice was low, thick with something like guilt. For a while, neither of us said anything. We just listened to the waves, letting their steady rhythm fill the silence between us. I wrapped my arms around my knees, feeling the rough wood beneath my feet. The night felt heavy, full of things unsaid. Finally I spoke. "You didn't have to do this. The deal, I mean." He let out a slow breath. "I did." "Why?" He rubbed his hands together the way people do when they're trying to warm something inside themselves. "Because I left your mother when she needed me most. And because I left you too." My throat tightened. "You walked away from us." "I know." His words cracked open something in the air. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought stepping back would make things easier. I told myself your mother was strong enough that she didn't need me. I told myself you didn't either. But none of that was true." I stared at him, searching his face for signs of insincerity, But all I saw was a hollow kind of regret, the kind that clings to a person like a shadow. She was hurt, I said softly. I know. His voice wavered. And I can't undo that. I can't fix what I broke. But when you called me when you asked for help, I realized it was the first time in years anyone trusted me with something that mattered. That wasn't trust, I murmured. That was desperation. He nodded. Maybe. But I'm grateful for it anyway. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to feel about him. Part of me wanted to push him away, remind him of every anniversary he missed, every moment he wasn't there to help my mother as she slowly unraveled. But another part of me, the exhausted, frightened part, knew I couldn't carry this alone much longer. And maybe, just maybe, he was trying to show up now in the only way he knew how. Does she remember everything about you? I asked after a long silence. He shook his head. No. But she remembers enough. That scared me more than if she remembered nothing at all. Remembering just enough meant remembering the pain, the abandonment, the unanswered questions. It meant there were wounds inside her that never fully healed. I looked out at the waves, the moon casting silver light across the water. She thinks I betrayed her. She'll understand eventually. I'm not sure she will. He turned to me, his expression softer than I expected. You did what you had to. She may not see it now, but one day she'll know how hard you fought for her. I hope so, I whispered. The wind shifted, bringing with it the familiar scent of salt and seaweed. For a moment I felt like a child again, sitting on these same steps with my mother behind me, brushing sand out of my hair. She used to tell me stories here. Stories of resilience, of women who carried entire worlds on their shoulders and never once looked down to see how heavy they were. I remembered believing I would grow up strong like her. Now I wasn't sure strength was something I had. It felt more like something I pretended to have until the pretending became a habit I couldn't break. My uncle stood up suddenly. I'm going to sleep in the guest room, he said. If she wakes up, don't let her see me just yet. I won't. He nodded once, then slipped inside the house, leaving me alone with the sound of the ocean and my own swirling thoughts. I stayed outside until the wind chilled my skin, until my eyes grew heavy, until I realized I needed rest or I'd collapse. The emotional weight of everything, the trip, the truth, the confrontation had seeped into every part of me. When I finally went inside, the house felt warm, almost protective. My mother was still sleeping peacefully, one hand curled under her cheek like she used to sleep when I was little. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and felt my chest ache with love so fierce it terrified me. I wished she knew how much I was trying. I wished she knew how scared I was. I wished she knew that every step I took was for her. But wishes didn't fix things. Reality did. And tomorrow reality would come knocking. The morning sun poured into the house long before I was ready to wake up. I must have fallen asleep on the living room floor because my neck ached when I opened my eyes. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a mug of tea she hadn't touched. She looked calm, but there was a tightness in her shoulders I recognized immediately. The kind she got when she was holding 1,000 emotions inside and didn't know how to release any of them. I sat across from her quietly. Morning. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she lifted her eyes to mine slowly, searching my face the way only a mother can, as if she could see the truth beneath my skin. You should have told me, she said softly. I know. She wrapped her hands around the mug even though the tea was cold. I'm not angry at you anymore. The relief that washed through me was so sudden it made my eyes sting. Thank you. But I'm still confused. That's okay, I said gently. We can take everything one step at a time. Her gaze drifted toward the hallway, the direction of the guest room. He's here, she whispered. Isn't he? Yes. She flinched just a fraction. I don't know if I can face him. I won't force you to, I assured her. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. She looked down at her hands. I'm not sure I ever will be ready. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she asked a question I wasn't expecting. Do you trust him, Mira? I hesitated, not because I didn't know the answer but because the truth was complicated. No, I whispered. But I trust his guilt. And I trust his need to make things right. And right now, that's something. She nodded slowly, absorbing my words like someone gathering pieces of a broken puzzle. I'm tired, she murmured. Of being afraid. Of forgetting. Of hurting. I know, I said, my voice thick. But you're not alone. She looked up again, and for the first time in a long while, her eyes softened with something warm. Not forgiveness, but something close. Stay with me today? She asked quietly. Always. I reached across the table and held her hand. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she didn't let go. The moment was fragile, but it felt like the beginning of something new, something that could grow if we nurtured it gently enough. We spent the rest of the morning wandering through the house. My mother touched everything as if each object held a secret she needed to unlock. She lingered in the kitchen, tracing her fingers along the ceramic tiles she installed herself. She smiled faintly when she found the faded measurement marks on the doorframe, lines she had drawn to track my height over the years. She ran her hand across the old piano she used to play whenever she wanted the world to feel lighter. I remember this, she said, pressing a single key. Not the whole song. Just the feeling. Sometimes that's enough, I whispered. By midday she seemed calmer, more grounded, like the house was stitching her back together in ways neither medicine nor therapy ever could. But trauma has a way of waiting. Lingering. Reappearing when we least expect it. And it did. That evening when she found something she wasn't supposed to see. A folder on the coffee table. My folder. Filled with medical reports. Her medical reports. I had forgotten to hide it. She opened it before I could stop her. The room froze around us. Mira, her voice broke. Why is my name on all of this? I felt my heart drop. I was going to talk to you about it, I whispered. When? After I forgot myself completely? Her voice trembled. Do I have a right to know what's happening to me? Or do you think I'll break if you tell me the truth? Mom, please. But it was too late. Her fear had already taken over. Her hands shook violently as she flipped through the pages. MRI scans, specialist notes, cognitive test results. Everything I had been trying to handle alone. Her eyes filled with terror. Mira, how bad is it? I froze. Because saying it out loud meant accepting it myself. She stepped toward me, clutching the folder. How bad? I swallowed hard. It's progressing, I whispered. Faster than we thought. Her face crumpled. She pressed her hand to her mouth, letting out a small, broken sound. And all I could think was, this is why I didn't tell her. This is why I carried the weight alone. This moment, this pain, was the very thing I had been trying to protect her from. She sank onto the couch, shaking. I'm scared, Mira. I know. I knelt beside her, my voice soft but trembling. But I'm here. I'll always be here. She closed her eyes and leaned into me, her forehead against my shoulder. Don't let me lose myself. You won't, I whispered, even though part of me knew it wasn't entirely true. I'll hold on to every piece of you. She cried quietly into my shirt, gripping my hand so tightly it hurt. And as I held her, I realized something. Bringing her back to the beach house wasn't just about memories. It wasn't just about safety. It was about giving her a place to face the truth without collapsing. A place that could hold her when I couldn't. Maybe it could hold me too. I don't remember getting out of the car. I don't remember walking up the old stone steps. All I remember is my fingers trembling as I reached for the doorknob and the way my breath caught in my throat, like my own body was warning me that nothing inside would be the same. When the lock clicked open, the quiet hit me first. That heavy, aching kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful at all. It feels abandoned. Feels forgotten. For a second, the house didn't even look real. The sun was setting behind it, pulling long shadows across the wooden floorboards, and for a moment it almost looked like it was inhaling, like it was waking up because it recognized me. I stepped inside, letting my fingers trail along the doorframe like I used to when I was a little girl racing inside after swimming too long in the cold surf. I didn't realize how much I missed that simple feeling of being touched by a home that loved me back. The air smelled different now, not the warm mix of sunscreen and sea salt and my mom's jasmine perfume, but dust and time. I could feel something tightening in my chest like nostalgia had claws. Mom. I called out reflexively, even though she wasn't here yet. The word floated through the empty hallway and dissolved, making the silence feel louder. I walked deeper inside, letting the thud of my footsteps echo as if the house needed proof I was actually here. The living room came into view first. The driftwood coffee table, the woven rug, the mismatched pillows. Everything was exactly where it always had been, but it felt like it was waiting for us, frozen, unsure if we were ever coming back. The last time I stood in this room, my mother was sitting on the couch with a mug of tea she never actually drank. She was staring out at the ocean like the waves were speaking some language only she understood. I'd been terrified to interrupt her because it felt like she was holding herself together with nothing but the thin thread of that view. Seeing the house now made me realize she'd been holding the place together the same way, with memory instead of maintenance. I should have told her sooner. I should have prepared her. But instead I stood there trying to swallow guilt that refused to go down. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it this time. Something was drawing me toward the back of the house, the hallway that led to the bedrooms. My feet moved on their own, carrying me through sunlight-faded walls and over the floorboard that always squeaked. When I reached the door to my old room, my hand just hovered over the doorknob. I wasn't sure why I was suddenly afraid. Maybe because I knew memories wouldn't stay memories once I opened that door. They would become present again. They would become real. I pushed it open. And for a moment I couldn't breathe. The room was exactly how I left it. The pale blue walls, the collage of photos along the mirror, the chipped dresser, the tiny window overlooking the sand dunes where I used to sneak out at night to watch the stars. It was like stepping into a version of myself I didn't know what to do with. On the bed sat the same faded quilt my mom made for me when I was 9. Scraps of old t-shirts and beach towels stitched into something warm. I sat beside it, brushing my fingers across the fabric, and all at once my throat tightened. I remembered lying here the night after my dad left. My chest burned with a memory I had tried to bury so deep it shouldn't have been able to surface anymore. I was 14. My mother had cried until her body couldn't hold her up anymore. I had crawled into this bed because it was the only place that felt like mine. And I had stared at the ceiling feeling like my heart had cracked into pieces I didn't know how to gather. But I had survived that. I reminded myself of that now. My eyes slid to the corner of the room where one last cardboard box sat half open. I knelt beside it and lifted the edges. Inside were my old letters, the ones I used to write to myself. My therapist back then called it future journaling. I called it begging the universe for a lifeline. I picked up the one on top. One day I hope I'm brave. Brave enough to leave. Brave enough to come back. Brave enough to forgive. The words felt heavier now. I tucked the letter back into the box, closed the lid, and sat on the floor, letting the past settle around me. It wasn't crushing me, but it wasn't letting me go either. It was holding me there in that moment, asking me to finally face what I'd been running from. I didn't know how long I stayed like that, but eventually the light outside the window shifted. The sky was deep orange, the way it always looked the night before monsoon storms rolled across the beach. I stood up slowly, brushing the dust off my jeans, and walked back toward the living room. I wasn't ready to tell her. I knew that. But the truth was waiting. Everything was waiting. And tomorrow she would step into this house expecting a vacation. Instead, I would hand her the news that could break her. As I stood there, staring again out the glass doors toward the ocean, something inside me whispered the question I had been avoiding since the moment she said the words that started all of this. "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house." What she didn't know was that the house held secrets I never told her. Secrets that didn't belong to either of us anymore. And I had 24 hours left before everything unraveled.